Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We're about to start here this town hall on proposal 1 about the implementation of medical marijuana here in Pontiac. I am Deirdre Waterman, the mayor of Pontiac. For all of you residents who are here, we're glad you're here to participate in this. There are many of you who are non-residents, and we also welcome you to be part of this discussion. So I'm going to first welcome you and have you know that we're happy that you're in the city of Pontiac and that this is a joint town hall with the mayor and our city council who have come together to see how this proposal is implemented in Pontiac. I'm very happy to have a number of presenters here who I will introduce to you shortly and tell you what the run of the events were here. There's plenty of seats for everyone, so if our hostesses could help people find places so everyone has a place to sit, there's places up here in the front of the room. Solomon, blue shirts, raise your hand if you're one of our ushers, okay? And there's some others here who can help you have you get seated. Excuse me. First, to help welcome you, I want to introduce our esteemed council president, Kermit Williams. I'd like him to give you also.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's give it up for our mayor, Mayor Deirdre Waterman. I want to recognize my colleagues who are in the audience, Councilwoman Mary Pedala, and the councilwoman for the district that we sit in, Councilwoman Patrice Waterman. When the mayor asked the city council to co-host this event, I was very pleased because we really need to hear from not only the citizens but the business owners on where you would like to see the dispensaries. There's a whole ordinance that has to be crafted, but the main part that we have a role in is determining where they go in the city of Pontiac. And so I'm looking forward with open ears and open hearts, and I just want to thank you guys again for showing up in numbers. It shows that you really care about this particular topic, but we want to hear from you, and so if you have some ideas, please feel free to share. Thank you again, Mayor Waterman.
Thank you, Council President. I want to introduce now the members of our head table. You've already met the Council President, but there are some experts we've invited to come speak to you about various topics. You had an agenda handed to you at the front desk as you came in, as well as some other materials. And we would like first to have the experts present to you on various topics according to your agenda. Then we will have a chance for you to ask questions. We'll have a question and answer period. And the question and answer period will be handled by you writing your questions, and some of our ushers will come around and pick them up, and we will answer them to you. Please put your name on them, so if you would like to stand and make sure that you're recognized and your question is answered. If you have a particular expert you want to address it to, then just put that name on there as well. After the question and answer period, we're going to give you a chance to break out into smaller groups by districts. So we will have breakout sessions, and we will have scribes who will show you where each district will be located. And you will have in each district a council person from that district. We understand some of the others are coming as well. And you will also have one of the experts there to be able to give you accurate answers to questions. So there will be 7 district tables. We have 7 districts in Pontiac. If you don't know which district or where the districts are, there's a district map right in the back. We understand that a lot of people don't know their districts by number, so we're prepared for people to help find your table. We'll also have a table with an expert, as well as myself, to talk about the application process. That will be the 8th table. So that'll be our breakout session. And after that, if we do have a quorum of council members here, then according to the Open Meetings Act, we do need to have a public comment, and that will be followed with closing remarks. So to begin, though, I would like to introduce you to Steve Hitchcock. Raise your hand, Steve. He is our first presenter. He is from the law firm of G. Markle, Mullins & Thornton, and he's going to be speaking just shortly. Tony Chubb. Tony is the city attorney who represents the whole city, but sits at our council meetings, and he is here to talk about the proposal one that's implemented in Pontiac. And there is the city attorney, John Clark, also from the same law firm. And to my left, your right, we have Donovan Smith, who is our city planner. He's going to talk about the flow chart of the application process. Vern Gustafson, our city planner, I must say he hasn't been here that long. What is it, almost 3 months now, Vern? One of the things we're doing as a city is to bring back in some of our departments, and the planning department was the first one we insourced. So we have our newly appointed city staff there for the planning department. So there's several purposes for this meeting, but the most important one was as we introduced this proposal one in Pontiac, people had a lot of questions. A lot of questions because number one, the short time frame we have to implement this. We're going to talk about the way the proposal was passed and the fact that it gave us 60 days. 60 days is kind of a short frame time considering a lot of communities when they implement these medical marijuana have had years to do it. So we're going to do it in 60 days. We want to do it right. So we want to answer the questions that people have had. That's why our experts are here. And then we're going to spend some time listening to you because we want to know how the residents want this implemented in Pontiac. It's very important. We heard from a number of residents who came to city council meeting last night. A number of them came and said, we don't want it in our neighborhoods. Okay, so that may be a starting point, but there are many other ways in which this can be implemented. So this is about as much about listening. Elected officials want to listen to it. And so that's a good part of what we're going to be doing this evening. So in the order that I presented the presenters, we're going to start right now. And I'm going to ask Mr. Steve Hitchcock to come forward to give his presentation. And then we'll follow it in the sequence that I presented them. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to take a few minutes to discuss highlights of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act with you. As you all know, for 10 years we've had medical marijuana in the state of Michigan, in which you had patients and you could have caregivers to dispense that marijuana, but there's been no law that permitted any storefront facilities in any way in the state until this new act was adopted in late 2016, and actually there was a year's hiatus after they adopted it before they were going to accept any applications, and the state has even stretched that out some. So now they're in full mode to try to issue some licenses on that. This act for the first time sets up 5 licenses that can be issued by the state of Michigan. One is a grower's license, and that's, of course, the person who actually cultivates the marijuana, and that person can actually then sell its marijuana to provisioning centers, which we'll say in a minute. That's the place where the retail outlet where you can buy marijuana, or to a processor, and that's a business that takes the marijuana and processes it into some kind of edible or drinkable form, so that you can get the THC from it without smoking a marijuana cigarette. So that's the second license, that's a processor. Then the third license, there's a safety compliance facility. All marijuana that's going to be sold under this act has to go through one of these safety compliance facilities for testing as to its purity and to its strengths, and it's going to have to be labeled, so when it's sold at a processing center, it has that labeling on it. So that's the third type of business. There's also going to be secure transporters, so any movement of the marijuana from the grower to a processing center, to a provisioning center, to the safety compliance facility, that all has to be done by hiring somebody who's got a secure transporter's license. They're the only ones that can transport the marijuana around. And then, of course, the last one is the provisioning center. And simply that's going to be the retail outlet where somebody who has a marijuana medical card, or if they are a licensed caregiver by the state, they can go to the provisioning center and they can purchase marijuana for their patients. If they're a caregiver or a patient themselves, can go in with their card and purchase their own marijuana. And there's going to be in the Act, there is in the Act, some prohibitions about owning more than one of these facilities. Some of them can, particularly the safety compliance facility and the transporter, whoever owns those cannot own the other types of facilities also. There's also the ability for the local community under this Act to opt out of the Act. And you don't actually specifically have to do anything affirmatively to opt out, as long as you don't pass an ordinance in your community to have these facilities. The state will not issue any licenses for anybody who wants a facility in a community that has not passed an ordinance. So your opting out can actually be just silence. The local committee doesn't do anything, which you'll hear in a moment won't be the case for Pontiac because there was a referendum ordinance on the issue. There is currently a large backlog between the number of applications State Lara has and the number that they have approved. I'm not sure how quickly they're going to catch up on that, but it could be quite a while before they are actually processing and granting licenses. So that's kind of the highlights of the Act itself. And everyone who is interested in one of these licenses is going to have to fill out an application form with the state of Michigan, which it's a pretty long form. It's got a lot of questions on it, asks for a lot of information in order to start that process. And then it also includes background checks, because under the licenses there's certain requirements of not having a criminal background, convictions involving controlled substances. It varies depending on the license as to the number of years past that you have to be. And so there's going to definitely be background checking done on all applicants. So that kind of gives you the highlighting of that Act. And we're also going to talk to you next about the specific ordinance in Pontiac.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Clark. I'm the city attorney for the city of Pontiac. Steve, I appreciate the discussion. So what I'm going to talk about are the specifics of the ordinance, which was, we call Proposal 1. The actual ordinance is about a 4-page document. This was on the August primary ballot, and after a recount process was approved by a single vote. All it takes is by one vote, right? So as of now, that is the law of the land. In essence, what Proposal 1 did, as Steve talked about, under the state law, if a community does nothing, you are considered as an opt-out. Unless as Steve said, that community passes an ordinance to opt in. So what this Proposal 1 did is it took from the legislative body, which is the city council, it took that authority and put it to the residents, who, through the adoption of Proposal 1, in essence, passed an ordinance to opt in. That's the way the law works. Not typically, but it did in this circumstance. So what does the ordinance provide? In essence, it provides for unlimited growers, processors, safety compliance facilities, and secure transporters. Again, Steve touched on it, I'll cover it again. Growers, those individuals that cultivate the marijuana. Processors, they take the harvest and they turn it into products, the oils, the chewables, things of that nature. Safety compliance, again, those individuals test the potency and purity of the product, label it, and then the transporters are those individuals that transport it from those other 3 facilities. So those are unlimited, no cap on those. And the ordinance also provides for 20 processing facilities, which are the end market where people actually would go to purchase the product if they have the appropriate state certification for medical marijuana provisioning centers, excuse me. Now, the ordinance does have some limitations. First of all, any individual who wants to be involved in the growing or the processing or the provisional centers, they have to have a state license, number one, okay? Again, there is a backlog of those, and I presume based on this provision and also what's on the ballot in November, that will increase in size and scope. The second limitation is that any of those facilities have to be at least 1,000 feet from a school and at least 500 feet from a religious institution, a park, or a child care facility. The other limitation has not yet been approved and will be under consideration very shortly, is a modification to the city zoning ordinance that will include additional potential limitations in terms of those various facilities. And so part of the process today, as the mayor indicated, is to get feedback from the community in terms of really how should that zoning ordinance amendment look. And so that was really the purpose of today. So that's a general overview. Like I said, the ordinance is multiple pages. We've kind of narrowed it down to kind of the key issues. And I believe my partner, Anthony Chubb, is going to talk about the application process next. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name, as my partner John Clark said, is Anthony Chubb. The mayor wanted me to touch a little bit more on the zoning ordinance that John just referenced, and then the application process itself, kind of the nuts and bolts of it. Based upon the number of phone calls I've gotten, I know there's a lot of interest in the zoning ordinance. And so, you know, we are working on crafting it. A lot of it comes down to the input that we received tonight, but we really hope to have the proposed zoning ordinance to the Planning Commission and the City Council the week of October 29th. And so we're on a really tight timeline here, but with that, we will have it implemented and enforced by the time that we start accepting applications. And so the Planning Commission meetings, all of the City Council meetings are all noticed on the city website. So please keep watching the city website. We're trying to update it every time that something happens. We'll be doing that, for example, when we get the application completed and things of that nature. You can also, of course, find all the information in the city clerk's office. So how the city ordinance is drafted is that the application process for non-dispensaries, that being the growers, the processors, the safety compliance facilities, and the secure transporters, began 60 days after the ordinance was finalized. It's because there was a recount. The recount wasn't certified until September 12th, and so that 60-day date falls on November 12th. So that's when the clerk's office will begin accepting applications for, again, the growers, the processors, the safety compliance facilities, and the secure transporters. And the ordinance then sets out a 7-day window after that, so no later than November 19th, that the clerk will set a 21-day window for the acceptance of the provisioning center applications. And so, you know, what we'll do during that 7 days is figure out the amount of interest in the first wave of applications and how many we receive, try to figure out a good faith estimate of when we will be able to timely review those, to figure out when we need to set that 21-day window, whether it needs to be, you know, a number of weeks or a number of months, to be assured that we're ready to review them when we do start accepting them. All applications are subject to a $5,000 application fee, as well as a $1,000 $1,000 special use fee. Those are non-refundable, and they're for a period of a year. Thereafter, you will have a $5,000 annual renewal of each of your each of your permits. And also, if you notice in the ordinance, which is available on the website if you hadn't seen it, there is a review process for any applications that are denied. Under that, there's the City Medical Marijuana Commission, which the mayor has the opportunity to appoint. And so if there is a denial that anyone feels is unfair, they can initiate their appeal through that process. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is, this is the city's proposal one. As a lot of people know, we now have a state proposal one that is going to be on the ballot in early November here. And we will have to factor how that plays into the implementation of our proposal one. And so if it does pass, we will have to review all legal options on that issue if it does pass. Okay. Do you want to speak next, Mayor?
All right,
That's
thank you. Now we'll go on to the planning phase. You've heard there's two-pronged process that has to go on in the city in that 60 days time. One is the zoning ordinance process, and the other one is the application process. So we have first Donovan Smith to talk to you about that flow chart and how that time frame works for doing the application process. Donovan?
Good evening, everybody. Donovan Smith, City Planner. So I want to start with, here at the Planning Department, this is a good crowd because it's our responsibility to make sure that the residents are aware of where their input falls in this planning process. But it's even more important that those parties who are interested in participating in medical marijuana facilities are aware where they fall in this application process as it relates to the city. So I'm going to start with when you're actually able to begin applying. As Tony said, November 12th is when you'll be available to go into the clerk's office, to look onto the website and actually find the application. And then, as he said, we will first start by accepting applications for non-provisioning centers. Like he said, transportation, growth, secure, and other uses is when you'll be able to do those. The following week, the clerk will announce when we will begin to accept applications for provisioning centers. And once we receive both of those applications, your next step is the internal review that we will begin to conduct with the various departments and entities that make these decisions related to the amount of scores and things in your application. Your next step is, once we're able to determine the scores of applications based on the criteria, we award those licenses to those applicants. So we'll award 20 provisioning center licenses, and then the other, there's no cap. So as long as those applications come in, you're awarded the points. If your license is denied based on whatever criteria, your score wasn't as high enough, then you'll have the opportunity to appeal that decision via the Medical Marijuana Commission. And that process will come later on. If you are accepted, your next step is to, the application will go to the Planning Commission, where it will undergo a special exemption process. These details are further highlighted in the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission will also have a public notice with all special exemption permits. So the residents within 300 feet of that area will be notified that there is an agenda item to the Planning Commission for a medical marijuana use. The district commissioners or the city council members will be notified that in their district there is an application going before the Planning Commission for medical marijuana. That is where residents have the most opportunity to voice their opinions on how they feel about medical marijuana uses and these facilities going in that particular area. If your application does go to the planning commission and your special exemption permit is denied, then you also have the opportunity to go before city council via appeal process to have that decision reviewed. Following the planning commission and that approval, then it will be your responsibility to come talk to myself or Vern in the planning department, where we will begin a site plan review, and we will get you the criteria, the checklist, and all the things you need to get through that site plan process correctly. And then one of the last few steps you'll have is, after your site plan process, you'll be expected to have your plan taken to engineering for review if necessary, finalized by your building department review, building permits and those things as well. So with that, that will be your application process for medical marijuana provisioning and non-provisioning centers. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for all joining us tonight. Vernon Gustafson, Planning Manager for the City of Pontiac. We've been talking with the great expertise we have in regards to the ordinance and great expertise in regards to the process. Now we're going to talk about in regard from a planning and zoning perspective and what our role is in regards to that process. As Donovan mentioned, coming up here on October 29th in front of the Planning Commission, not just the zoning text amendment related to the marijuana ordinance, we would also be looking at adjustments to our zoning ordinance that would facilitate direction and guidance and regulations as relates to those proposed uses that have been identified as what we call medical marijuana facilities. And let me just say that here in the city with the approved medical marijuana ordinance, we cannot unduly change that, and also we cannot restrict to prevent any medical marijuana business from opening in Pontiac. But what we can do is take a look at the types of uses they are, the impacts upon existing uses that are within areas, along corridors, within our industrial areas, within our commercial areas, to really kind of determine exactly to minimize any type of impact and figure out what would complement with other uses that are already here, be it either along corridors in downtowns, north end of downtown versus the south end of the city. So it's in a very fluid process right now, and tonight we see it as much more learning from you and educating you, and then also vice versa. And I think it's important that we understand that land use planning and zoning really looks at the use of the land. It's not about who is the business owner, the property owner, or the customer might be. And we have taken, as it was described, knowing the fact of the vote here on November 6th, we really have to understand that these medical marijuana provisioning centers and facilities, which could be reverted to recreational, we kind of explored that in regards to talking with other communities. I've talked with some great experts out west and kind of taking how that transition worked. Similar types of uses, but obviously what it boils down to is it's looking at approving the location of those uses, and the state approves who buys and who sells the marijuana for various purposes. We are also mandated to look at various buffers that we talked about here, describing from churches and schools and distances. We have also looked at maybe kind of a conversation I'd like to hear maybe in breakout sessions would be in regards to what your feeling is in regards to concentrating these types of uses in select areas versus dispersing them out through the community. And I think that should be on your mind in regards to what your belief is and what would work best for our community. When we start to look at concentrating them, we're going to be probably taking a very close look in regards to where those could be and placement. And what we call is a zoning overlay district, where we lay on top of the existing zoning, so we can kind of figure out, again, restricting the types of uses, minimizing the impacts upon neighborhoods, again, with all the other zoning ordinance requirements. And I think what we've really learned is the best approach has been to take a look at the importance of what the uses have in select areas. Provisioning centers, as talking with other officials, my peers, so to speak, and talking with the APA, you're looking at, provisioning centers as retail and where those retailers will be best suited for your community, and also to make sure that the businesses do thrive. Like I said, we can't restrict these types of uses, but also looking at the growers and the processors and the transporters and where are they best suited because of the size of their business, the intensity of their business, their hours of operation might be totally different than a provisioning center, so where are they better suited? And those are, obviously strongly looking at our industrial districts, which are, we have 2 of those districts, M1 and M2. As relates to, I think what's important is, as we move forward, as Donovan alluded to, what's important is the aspect of allowing a correct amount of involvement to making sure that we're making the right choice in regards to where those businesses are going to be located. So one thing that I heard loud and clear was to institute, as the uses come on board that are going to be reviewed, we would take a look at developing a good neighbor policy or a set of meetings that we would ask to go out into. That proposed use would be asked to go out to the district and meet with those district stakeholders and also their council representative to ensure that there is an acceptance before the city approves. And then another layer would be the special exception use permit. Again, that would go in front of the planning commission, public hearing is required, and then we get into site plan review and approval to make sure that they meet all the zoning ordinance requirements. With that being said, also I think it's important to note that if you look at there is a certain level of economic impact. I think that the businesses will thrive, the community is going to thrive, and the question really comes down to concentrate it or disperse it. I think it's really important to understand that there obviously, we're looking at an increase in real estate values, we're looking at an increase in generating revenue for the community, and which provides more in city services. In regards to the community as a whole. And I think that's important through the sales tax and through the income tax and through property tax. So we see it as a win-win situation to allow the uses to grow in an appropriate location. With that being said, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vern, and we'll be proceeding with the question and answers. There are some index cards on your tables. We do have Jane, our monitors can come around if you have a question that you would like to ask. Please fill out the card. Please put your name on it. We want you to be recognized. We have enough mics to go out into the ring. So if you can have our monitors start to pick up the index cards if people have questions. And we'll start that very brief shortly here. There's also some people standing. Some of our monitors, we can put some extra chairs out for the people who are standing, so we have a seat for everybody. If you would like to have a seat, there's still some seats up front if you would like to come up front. So I said this was a lot about listening to you, listening to see how we want to implement Proposal 1 that best benefits the city of Pontiac. So we've listened to what the state has said in terms of the law they passed. We know about the ordinance that was brought to the city that was voted by the people. We know what LARA says, that's the regulating organization, the state. Now we want to know what Pontiac wants. And those of us who are the elected officials and the planning commission, all those who will be implementing this, as well as the staff, the attorneys, need to do that in a way that we know the citizens want the citizens of Pontiac. We know what benefits there will be for the city, and we want to know how we can implement that in a way that is with integrity and fairness, and that at the end of it, that we can keep some of the money and the prosperity here in Pontiac. Amen. So that's what we want to do, right? Now, we know some of the ways that this benefits the city of Pontiac is that there is tax revenue, you've heard that. So that will come. There's also other ways to generate benefits for the city of Pontiac, and I think one of our presenters talked about the way you can do benefits, community benefits. So we're looking at to see how that can be integrated into the process too, and that's what we're also talking about. We're also looking to see what it means in terms of jobs. You know, the proposal that passed the Jobs for Pontiac. So people I know have questions and want to know what kind of jobs will this bring to Pontiac? Who's eligible for these jobs? What is the pay scale? People who are residents have asked me, and Deputy Mayor have gone out and talked to a lot of district meetings and other community meetings, and people want to know, you know, what's in it for me? Can I be part of this? Can I be eligible for this process? So we want to have you ask questions, and I think our presenters can talk about that as well. Personally, I want to find out how we can keep some of this prosperity in our city. You know, from all I've heard, the anticipation is that Pontiac is going to be pretty overwhelmed with applications come November 12th and beyond. And our city clerk is going to be pretty busy with all the departments because that application process is going to flow through her department with the help of many of our department heads. So we want to make sure that that application process is fair, but yet that's the way we can put the things in the application process that will generate what we as Pontiac citizens want to see and bring to our community. So there'll be questions about that, I'm sure. I personally, in the scoring process you heard about, I personally would like to, I'm going to push for having some extra points where there is local involvement, you know, some of our local businesses and residents of the city of Pontiac. So that's one person. It's going to be a whole process here. As you said, we're going to do it in 60 days. We want to do it right the first time. You know, there's a number of cities who have introduced the medical marijuana after November 6th, maybe recreational marijuana too. Some of the cities did it in a hurry, and they did it in such a way that it was not working for the city, and they had to revamp it all over again. You know, it's always harder to undo something you've already started. So we want to do it the right way, the right time. We want to do it with integrity. And to that point, you know, we have always said that we would have a point person for answering your questions. Many of you called me, and I've said, hey, look, you know, I want to make sure that everybody's getting the right answer. So we've, up to date, sent those questions right to our point person, Attorney Chubb. Because one of the things that we want to bring is to make sure that this brings benefits to the city and done in the right way. And one of the things that people I'm reminded of often is what happened with the Silverdome. You know, some years ago, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, the Silverdome, which was massive of the city, where the Lions, whether you like them or love them or hate them or not, they played in the city of Pontiac. And the city had 3 offers to sell the Silverdome after the Lions left and went back down to Detroit. The city had 3 offers totaling about each about $20 million with different projects. And unfortunately, our city council couldn't come to a conclusion. So one by one, they got disgusted and left. So instead of being able to get $20 million for the Silverdome was sold by the emergency manager for $583,000. Something that still resonates. So we don't want this challenge that we have. We don't miss the opportunity to benefit from that. So as we're doing that, we're going to turn down to the question and answers. Have we had some time, Jane? We have some questions now from the audience? All right. Let's bring those up front. Let's get started with those. And I'm going to try to read these. And I need to get glasses on. Vanessa Bridges. Where is Vanessa? Vanessa Bridges? Right here. You want to stand here and so crowd can see you? So she says, how many here today live in Pontiac? Residents in Pontiac? Okay. All right. Okay. Glad you are here. Non-residents are welcome as well, but we want to hear from you, so please indicate that. All right. Here's Irene Wright. Has there been consideration for a percentage of or a specific number of Pontiac residents to acquire licenses in all 5 areas? Irene, where are you? You are a resident. Yes, thank you, Irene, for this question. Who would like to answer this question? Attorney Chubb?
Right. Good evening, Ms. Wright. Yeah, we really want to maximize the participation of residents, both as people that are participants in cooperating in starting these, but also in working in them. However, under the confines of Proposal 1, we cannot provide additional points for people or set-asides for people because they are residents.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that on the panel? All right. How will the tax money be used, and how will we know it's getting used for that purpose? Well, so everybody speak at once.
I can't necessarily say how it's going to be used, but I can tell you how it's going to flow. There's a 3% state tax on the gross sales of the provisioning centers only, not the sales of the other facilities. There's no tax on that. And of that 3%, the statute says that 20% of that 3% goes to the local community that is housing the facilities. And you don't count just the provisioning centers in counting those. All the facilities get counted. So and it's not clear in the act whether the Treasury, the state Treasury is going to run that part of it, whether that means that that 30% of the 3% that comes from the provisioning centers in Pontiac stays in Pontiac, or whether that's a statewide pool of all the provisioning centers and all the facilities and all the money that came in. And if Pontiac, for example, had 1/30 of all the sites, they would get 1/30 of the money. It's not clear in the act how they're going to do that division. But as to whatever the money is that the city gets, I guess that's not up to me, that's up to the city council.
70% need to stay in the community.
I'm going to speak to that too, because as mayor and our council people are here with us, we set the budget for the city. And certainly we operate with a budget which has been not only balanced, but has produced a surplus for the last number of years. When a number of us came into office, there was a deficit here. So we're proud to have done that. And we are operating on a budget now that's roughly half of what it was back when we had 8 plants here, with essentially the same number of people. So we're learning to work efficiently and effectively to make sure that that budget gets delivered to the people for purposes they want. So that's how it's going to be spent as we get additional revenue. And certainly there's a lot of needs of the city that we would like to fulfill that extra revenue would help. We'd like to fix our roads more, you know. We'd like to fix our parks. Beautiful Crystal Lake Park is one of the parks that we can refurbish. So there's many things we can do for that, and I think people see that their money is going to good use when they see the roads being repaired, their parks refurbished, lights controlled in our neighborhood. So maybe other council people want to add to that in their district breakout sessions, but I just wanted to add that part. The next question is from April Forbes. April, if you're here, I'm going to give you a little plug. April Forbes, owner of the Menagerie Lounge right here in downtown Pontiac. Okay. Great stage, great music. So come to the Menagerie Lounge. All right, her question is, with recreational use right around the corner, I guess you are going to vote for it, huh? April? How will that affect the points given? How will new businesses who wish to operate as recreational use be able to go through the licensing process? All right. Mr. Hitchcock again?
Well, assuming it passes, what you're seeing on the ballot is a real abbreviation of a whole statute that was created. So it's all going to be laid out in a statute that, first of all, it requires another license. So those who want to sell recreational marijuana are going to have to apply to the state of Michigan for a license for recreational. But what it does say is that during the first 24 months, those who have licenses for marijuana facilities under the act we're talking about tonight will get the preference for the recreational licenses also. So I suspect you're going to see a lot of the recreational marijuana sold out of the same facilities that have the medical marijuana licenses. And then after 24 months, the state gets to decide if they think there's a need for more, and if so, they can open it up to applicants who don't already have a license.
You might as well stay standing, Mr. Chalk, because I think this one will direct to you as well, since you have expertise on this. Several questions relating to that, if the recreational ordinance ballot initiative passes. If the state proposal passes, does that supersede our vote, or I think they're talking about the medical marijuana? And what exactly will be the differentiation between the two?
Well, under the Medical Marijuana Act, you're still going to have a card, medical marijuana card issued by the state in order to buy on that. And the recreational marijuana, you have to be 21 to buy recreational marijuana. So you'll still have, number one, you'll have the people who have cards, medical marijuana cards, who are under age 21, that'll still have to get any marijuana they want through the medical marijuana method. But I assume that for all those who have cards now that are over 21, they may elect to buy recreational marijuana. That's hard to tell how that's going to go.
Just one thing on that, everybody thinks recreation is going to be available on November. So
I can't hear you.
it's not going to happen.
Oh, say it again.
No, there's going to be another long licensing process before there's going to be anybody selling recreational marijuana. And how fast they've handled the licensing process so far for the medical marijuana facilities, we're probably years away from any licenses for recreational marijuana facilities.
Good, all right. Another question about buffering and how relating to the state regulations. So the first one is, how will the buffered areas be measured? And what is the initial view from the council on what zones, locations, buffers will be for provisioning centers? So we can have that come from Vern and
Yeah.
this is the record council. I don't know if anybody council wants to answer or let Vern answer for you.
Let me just answer the question in regards to buffers. The way that the buffers will be calculated or measured will be similar to a liquor license, where it would go from the primary access point from the proposed business of a medical marijuana business, projecting out to the center line of the road, down the center line of the road, 500 or 1,000 feet, to the primary entrance to either the school, playground, commercial childcare, and religious institution. So it's not kind of like as the crow flies, believe me.
This is another question about one of the buffered institutions, and that is, what is the definition of a commercial childcare center, specifically with reference to licensed childcare? Do individuals operating licensed daycare out of their homes fall under the definition of a commercial childcare?
No, it does not.
What falls under the definition?
Is a commercial childcare center that is licensed with the state, and in the ordinance it does say non-home occupation.
Okay. Next question. If a valid provisioning center application is not one of the 20 selected, are the application fees still non-refundable? And second part of this is, will an applicant's state licensing status affect their chance of selection as one of the 20 provisioning centers?
Okay, with regard,
Okay, first of all, non-refundable is non-refundable, period. The second piece of it is
Glad to know that.
is the application will still be processed if you have an application in process with the state. How the proposal one is written is that you can't operate the facility until you have that state license.
That answer your question? All right. This one asks about, what about my legal 12 medical plants if recreational is passed? Someone who obviously is growing 12 plants.
Well, if you have a medical marijuana card and you're growing your 12 plants, you still can grow your 12 plants. This act doesn't affect that at all. That other act is still in play. If you're a licensed caregiver, you can continue to be a caregiver, and you can grow 12 plants for each person that you're a caregiver for. Up to 5, you can have 5 patients. So none of that that's already set forth in the Medical Marijuana Act is changing as a result of this Facilities Act.
Very good. All right. How much will the input from local residents and businesses affect the application approval process? We'd like to take that on. How much will the input from local residents and businesses affect the application approval process?
Well, the ordinance, the proposal one that was passed, sets forth 8 criteria that the clerk's office and the other departments have to evaluate. So we're pretty limited to those criteria, and only where public community comments fit into those 8 criteria will we be able to deviate from those 8 issues.
Isn't it also true to say, Attorney Hitchcock, I'd just add a addendum to that the city does determine its application process. So if there's specific kinds of provisions that the city wants to achieve, then they can include that in the application process up to certain limits. Is that not correct?
Yes, yeah, there might be some questions that draw out information that the city wants to know in the application process. And then, of course, you're going to go before, if you get through the application process, you're going to go before the Planning Commission, and in front of the Planning Commission, every citizen can appear. Those are public meetings, and make their voice heard about the situation for the specific site that's being proposed by that applicant.
All right. What would a meeting be without a question from Chuck Johnson? Where are you, Chuck? All right. The question is, let everybody see you, Chuck, here. The question is, let me get it right. I want to hear from that from you later. I hope the city government allows for local minorities to be included in all phases of their decisions. All right? I just want us to expound upon that. Thank you for the question, all right? And, we want this to be inclusive as city government has been of the administration, and that's why we want to have people have full information on how they can access. Anybody want to add to that? Council? All right. Okay. Next question from Melissa Bridges. Melissa? All right, thank you for the question. Is there a city restriction on non-Pontiac residents, business owners, on the many marijuana locations they're allowed to open versus actual Pontiac residents? Thank you. Who's on board for this?
Again, there aren't any set-asides specifically for residents to receive applications or to receive permits, but one of the factors that we do have in grading is factor number 6, which does note that it is a review of whether the applicant has articulated plans and strategies to attract and hire employees from the city of Pontiac. And so all of the applications, whether they're a resident or not, will have to answer that question and show how they are intending to get employees that are from our city.
Can I have an extension to that question? So there's no regulation as far as like business ownership, as far as keeping the money in Pontiac like a business owner. like I'm a business owner and I want to open up. So I feel like I should have, not necessarily maybe more rights, but it should be regulations. Because for the money to circulate in ownership, not just for hire.
Yeah, no, that's one of the problems with this company that brought forth Proposal 1, Jobs for Pontiac, who has never made themselves known to any of the residents or the leadership. We do not know who Jobs for Pontiac is. They were the ones that drafted Proposal 1. It doesn't include something like that, and that's unfortunate, but that's how we have to implement.
Right. As we said, once again, the application process is something that the city can put our stamp on it, and that's why we're here to listen to those of you who want to know how you can be included in the process. So we're helping to define what goes in that application process by some of the conversation we have right now. Council President is going to speak.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I guess to piggyback on her question, there's a provision in 6 Attorney Chubb talked about local participation as far as employment. Maybe part of the scoring needs to be looked at from a legal standpoint about partnership and ownership and not just people that are employed by those individual people. So not having a plan to employ people, but coming to the table with people already on board from Pontiac might be a helpful scoring mechanism.
Here we go. All right, so next question. What do you mean that we can use it, Proposal 1 medical marijuana, as an economic development tool? Maybe one of our planners can speak to that.
Like I was referencing, there is opportunities when we start looking at various select areas in our community. Obviously, we see that as a tool for investment, revitalization that could occur in supplement to those businesses that are moving in. So obviously with that, in regards to looking at taxes and sales tax and property tax, all of those things have a definite effect in improving a select area. So that does create an economic impact, also providing jobs and other opportunities, and also complementary businesses to the medical marijuana industry could also be supported to supplement their practices in that business.
There's some specific examples of this from experiences of other cities. I think in some of your packets, you got the article just recently in Orion Township, where the city brought in their own zoning ordinance, and they decided to, for their purposes, they wanted to limit it just to growers. So they used it as economic development for an area, an industrial area that was long vacant, that they hadn't developed. And they opened just the other week or so a beautiful growers park that had was an economic development tool for them. So in that instance, of course, they had opted just for growers, whereas in Pontiac, because of the ordinance, we have all the facilities of marijuana, medical marijuana business. So but likewise, you know, the planning and the thought you put into it, we can also use it for economic development. We could actually use the revenue into areas of economic development that we want to achieve as a city. And that's one of the things that we can direct some of the community benefits for that can also be put into the application process. So that is my understanding, and that's what I hope that we can also include in our process. All right, so what are the proposed zoning areas? Will a waiver be allowed or considered within an area of specifically a religious institution? Is there state approval or proof of state application submittal necessary to apply in a city? So this is regarding the application process, and I guess they want explanation of what the zoning map that you showed on there, Karen.
Yes, as we're there. As we're exploring various zoning districts, we would need to identify closely in regards to areas that we would consider. A waiver, I think what you're saying is in regards to rezoning. I guess that's a question that we would have to look at as relates to not just the zoning, but also our future land use plan, which governs development patterns, it governs open space, our road system, in regards to how that, and also taking a look at the existing zoning map and how that could work as a possibility. So there's a lot of layers of review to determine if that rezoning is appropriate. Within the area specifically to religious institution, I would say that those standards in regards to distances are set for the ordinance, and we would not allow any waivers or variance upon those restrictions. The last question was related to state approval or proof of state application submittal necessary to apply for the city. Tony?
State approval is required for city license.
Yes, absolutely.
That is, okay. You
His
said yes,
answer was
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Although the state has not approved that many yet, so what about the fact that we will have city license processing going on? How does that interact?
They'll have to have an application in process, but it doesn't have to be approved when they put in the city application. The city application, they just can't operate under the city application or the city approval until they have state licensing.
Can't hear you. What kind of proof do you want that a state application is pending?
The draft application we have is asking for a copy of your application to the state.
Excuse me, attorney. I'm not sure if this is correct, but don't you have to be approved for a city before you can put your application in for a state?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Obviously, some people have more information than others. This is what it's about, to make sure you get clear information. So we like your questions. The next question is from Rick David, another resident. Where are you, Rick? I saw you earlier. Okay, Rick, there he is, a very illustrious citizen here and CEO of the Lighthouse. He wants to know, he wants you to explain, and this is an attorney question here, where the businesses bank, since the federal law is against the medical marijuana facilities.
I meant that if they're regulating the banks, and I wanted to know if they regulate the federal laws against marijuana, hasn't made it legalized, where do people bank?
Yeah, in your pocket. Yeah, it's my understanding that they can't bank in any facility that has federal accreditation, and so I think that is one of the big problems of implementation. Until there is federal approval of medical marijuana, this is going to be a cash business, and so I think a lot of people wonder where they bank, and I don't have the answer.
Okay. We have several legal questions here, so I'm going to let the attorneys kind of divide those amongst themselves, and if you would please read your question and then answer the question, we'll let you do the next several, all right? Okay. Okay, right here. Who wants to start? If not, I'll ask a question while you're sorting those out. This question is from Jen Zielinski. Jen, right there. Would it be possible to implement a memorandum of understanding to provide clarity on what the city wants to see in the applicants? Although not legally binding, it gives the industry insight as to the items that are important to the city. For example, residents to hire, ownership opportunities, community benefits, etc.
Good.
All right. Who'd like to tackle that one?
Did you hear that question?
We got a memorandum of understanding what the city is wants in its application process. Okay, while we're studying it, let me take a stab at it. Sometimes jump out where angels fear to tread. I guess that's what mayors can do. You ready to study it? Okay.
I can answer that. I think that the ordinance is very clear on the 8 criteria that are the basis for the scoring, and I can actually go a little bit further into that and also answer Daniel Williams' question, because he also asked whether we would have a rubric to set forth what we do expect for the scoring of that. The application will provide a rubric on some of the scoring qualifications that we see to be a little more vague. We will try to provide some assistance so that the applicants can provide a more comprehensive response.
While you're standing, I think you had covered all this, but Mike Haddad wants to know, when will the Planning Commission make their recommendation to City Council? There is a schedule that you announced. Could you tell us that again?
Yes, it's my hope that there will be approval of the proposed ordinance on October 29th. That's a Monday, and I will then take it to first reading on October 30th to City Council.
Got everything to work smoothly here. We got a tight window to work it on. Council's listening. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Sure. There's another one that says, how does the federal law affect these proposals? You know, I think that's everyone that understands that is in this business, it's a gamble. And at any time, we don't know what what federal enforcement might do. And so that's a calculated risk that everyone in this business, be it Colorado, Pontiac, they understand that is the deal. Sure. Do you have a timeline of when you will accept provisioning center licenses? As I had referenced, no later than October 19th, November 19th, we will set out through the clerk's office the 21-day period. It's going to depend a lot on how many of the non-dispensary facility applications that we get so that we can determine how long we're going to need to score those applications.
And this is part of the same question from Mike Bahura. How long will the application window be open for submission?
Sure. For provisioning centers, it's a 21-day closed period. If we don't get 20 qualified applicants in that 21 days, we won't have 20 dispensaries. That's how the proposal is written. With regard to the non-dispensary applications, it's unlimited. So as long as people can find a conforming use and can submit a complete application, that will remain open. It will be just during the 21-day period unless the city council decides to reopen. And then we also have a question, what are the criteria for the point system? If they aren't currently available, when will they be? I won't go into it because it's a very detailed scoring system, but it's available on the website, just pontiac.mi.us, or it's also available in the clerk's office. It's set forth right in the ordinance.
Another question about scoring. Who does the scoring?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of different factors when we consider these applications. There are ramifications that are, pertinent to legal, to planning, to public safety, to infrastructure. A 1,500 plant grow facility is going to use a lot more water than a traditional, business of that same size. And so we're going to have to work with with the Water Resource Commission. And so it's going to be across a lot of different factors, and building safety is also going to play a big role.
Another part of that question, does it say in the ordinance that scorers may include local participation and ownership as a factor in deciding who's granted the license?
Yeah, I think that's been asked several times, and like I said, it definitely does provide for participation in a way for employment, but not set-asides for granting licenses.
Okay. Is the location of a provisioning center, or dispensary is written here, within 1,000 feet from a school simply give it less points, or does it disqualify it from the location absolutely?
That's a good question. Under section 9 sub F sub 8, it technically just a point qualification. However, these are deemed a reasonable health, safety, and welfare setbacks, so they will be incorporated into the zoning ordinance. That would make it an absolute prohibition to place them within 1,000 feet of the school system, of a school.
Might as well stay standing, because I think there's a number. Might as well cover these now. Will there be a distance restriction between provisioning centers? This is from Zach Bernard. Zach? Somewhere here? Okay. Is there a distance requirement?
There is not a buffering requirement between any facilities under the act the way that it's written.
But the city can.
The city could theoretically include it in the zoning ordinance, which again, on the 29th, we'll have the final version and that'll be in front of the commission.
All right. What is the status of the caregiver model in Pontiac?
I'm not sure what that means. It means state, I think I mentioned earlier, under the state law, there's no change. If you're a caregiver and you want to continue to be a caregiver for up to 5 patients, most patients still want you to be their caregivers. You can continue that model and nothing changes.
All right, on a different vein here, how does a group like, quote, Jobs for Pontiac, end quote, come in and be able to get a proposal on the ballot and we not know who they are? Well, maybe we should ask, is there anybody here who wants to claim credit? We'd like to have you stand up and take credit for this. Anybody? You asked the question, thank you, all right. Well, I was going to ask you a question. Does anybody in the room want to take credit for bringing this ordinance to Pontiac, Jobs for Pontiac?
They even send us personally. I have 5 people in my home. We all got so much mail,
Right.
individual with our name. Like something, and then I went on, I Google it, they spent millions of dollars. So nobody know up there who did this?
Maybe Batman is funny.
Well, that's reality right now, but passed by 1 vote in Pontiac. So that's what we're having this town hall, and that's why we're moving forward this. All right, so nobody stands up to take credit. We'll love to recognize who you are, because, but at any rate, I don't know if anybody answers this as a question, but how do they do that? Because they've had a referendum process.
Yeah, under the city charter referendum process, anyone can solicit signatures to put a referendum item on the ballot. They did it properly and submitted it properly through the clerk's office, and so they can do it with relative anonymity, as we found out. But I think that the city has taken the right steps to take what they have given us and we'll implement it the best that we can and try to make it a positive for the city.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Tom Taylor. He's a Pontiac businessman, he says, for 27 years. Tom, there you are. And wants to continue doing business in Pontiac respectfully. Is that a question, Tom?
I've been in the city of Pontiac for 27 years. I'd like to continue on for what's best for the city of Pontiac and the neighborhoods. I'm all for. We're going to apply for 3 licenses for the growing, processing, and a provision center. And I was looking at this picture here of Lake Orion. I think we could duplicate that. I do too. So I mean, and that's where we're coming from. And our group has already kind of got a vehicle with the city of Inkster, applying for the state of Michigan. So we're trying to. I've been a businessman in Pontiac for 27 years. I didn't live here, but I did physically for 27 years. I started in Detroit and I came to Pontiac and I did the best I could for what I could do and give back to the community. So that's what our intention is. We're for the whole neighborhoods, we're for everybody. And there's enough jobs in Pontiac and there would be jobs there to give people in Pontiac. So that's where our intention is.
Thank you, Tom. All right. Yes, and I can attest that he's been a respectful business owner and doing business respectfully. Thank you, Tom. All right, the next question, I think we're going to take, we said we'd stop at 7:30, so maybe that allows us time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll break up into our smaller groups. So if we can get our scribes ready, Rachel, and to their tables and their flip charts. So the next question is, how exactly, and this is for our planners too, how exactly will real estate values increase? What are the hours of operation? I don't know if this relates to provisioning centers or others. What is the oversight of the business? I guess that deals with regulation. And what are the local employment opportunities for residents? So let me pass this down to Mike. It's a multi-point question. Okay. Are there some new questions?
Yeah, that's the question I gave you.
Let me get it.
Okay, so with regard to real estate values, we have spoken to
Okay, hold on just a minute. We just want to make sure everybody can hear who wants to say, those of you who are ready to go. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your input. We hope you learned something about the process in Pontiac. So let's give our attention to Attorney Chubb.
Sure. With regard to real estate values, it says how exactly will real estate values increase. This isn't scientific, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence in speaking to some of the city real estate agents.
Hold on just a minute. Can we just be respectful? There are some people who want to hear and maybe have trouble hearing, so I'm going to ask Attorney Chubb to come to this microphone.
Yeah, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from speaking with several real estate agents that do a lot of the commercial transactions in the city that commercial and industrial parcels and buildings that have been dormant for years have actually now faced multiple offers, multiples more than they were asking a year ago. And so I think that while it's not scientific, there's no debating it if you try to go find a place for sale right now. With regard to hours of operation, it's my recollection that under both the state and our local ordinance, the operating hours are 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Oversight of business is a very complex web of administration by both the state and by the city. And so we certainly will be overseeing these businesses through the building and safety department, through planning, and through the police and law departments also.
This pre-law said it says 7 to 10.
Thank you. Sorry, Councilwoman Petula just corrected me. It's 10 p.m., not 11 p.m. that they need to close by. There's also something that says, please clarify the statement that an application must be filed with the state before you can file a Pontiac application. Where does it state this in the ordinance? It's my recollection, and you can obviously, we can't provide you legal advice. You can have your attorneys do that. But it's my recollection that one of the requirements of your application is that you attach your state application.
Okay, Rachel, our scribes should come to their tables now. Our scribes should come to their tables now. Okay. Yes, we will. We'll take one more question while our scribes are getting to their tables here. What other types of businesses may benefit by having medical marijuana centers? All right. For those of you who want to stay, we'll be setting up the tables. For those of you who have been present with us, thank you. All right, Rachel, we're going to divide up into districts meetings now, and we want the scribe to stand by the table. Hold on, where's the District 1? Hold that up. Anybody wants to meet with council? Let me let people leave.